What's going on, guys? Back for another TJ video today. Got something we're going to be installing that's not necessarily performance related, but just kind of a fun thing. We haven't done a lot of interior upgrades really other than the bar tack stuff. But today we've ordered something and finally came in that we're going to be installing. Going in the rear of the Jeep. It has to do with audio. Let me come back over to the workbench, show you guys what we got for the Jeep. If you guessed subwoofer, you were correct. We got a Kicker Comp 10, which is a 10-inch sub. Came with a Power Acoustics amp mounted to the side. The reason we went with this kit isn't necessarily the equipment, but it's a kit that comes from Quadratech that is specially made to mount into the back of the Jeep using factory holes. If it lines up right, this will screw into the floor pan in the back of the Jeep here without having to drill anything, because with the kind of off-roading we do, we cannot have a sub just flopping around. It's not going to work. So hopefully we can get this mounted, not have to do any drilling, and this will be a good little kit. This is the box for the amp, and they just sent the wiring in with it. I have always run 4-gauge sub wire. They sent 8-gauge, so we'll see if the 8 can power the 10 good enough to where we're satisfied with it. If not, we'll order some 4-gauge power wire. So what's included in the wiring is obviously your power wire with an inline fuse. Got your ground cable that'll go from the amp to somewhere on the Jeep. Got your RCAs that'll run from the amp to the back of the radio. Got your power on off wire. This thing pretty much just turns the amp on whenever you turn the radio on, instead of the amp staying on with the battery, which you don't want. You really want to be able to turn your head unit off, and then this will go off as well. So that's what this does. Looks like we've got a little bass boost knob, a bass control knob. Not sure we'll use that, but they sent it. And then just an extra fuse here, and they sent a drill bit in case we do have to drill, which I'm hoping we don't. So that's what we have. I believe this amp is 1600 watts peak, but at 4 ohms, which is what the sub's wired to, I believe it's going to be around 500 amps. We're not looking to rattle the windows out or anything. We love music. We love listening to music on the trail, and this will give us just a little extra punch. So now that we've gone over what all they sent to us, we'll go ahead and get started on the install. First thing I noticed right off the bat, both of these brackets came faced in, kind of like this one still is. I literally saw people on Quadratech bashing this kit because they went to put it in their Jeep and the holes didn't line up with what's inside the tailgate here. We measured this from there to here, 22.5 inches. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that all you've got is 2 Phillips head screws. Run them out, flip these things around. It's clearly meant to mount this way. It's got this little brace right there. People were bashing this kit on Quadratech, asking for returns and order cancellations because this didn't work. I mean, just use your brain, people. Sorry, I didn't mean to get on my soapbox there. It's just things like this get trashed online all the time, and it's usually install error or operator error or something. It's rarely the equipment. Just take the extra 2 seconds and think about it for a minute before you go back online asking for a refund. 2 screws. Flip this bracket around 180 degrees and run her back in there. Should measure right around what we need to mount it in the Jeep with no drilling. We're still gonna run wires and everything before we actually screw this thing to the floor, but look at that, perfect. The back door shuts fine. Just looks really clean. As long as everything else goes well, this kit seems pretty well made. First thing you always want to do doing anything electrical is unhook your negative battery terminal. I'm using a 1/2 inch deep socket. Set it down to the side. Second thing we're going to do, since it's probably the most pain in the butt part of a whole install, feeding this power cable through this grommet here and getting it situated in the inside of the Jeep and then run back to the sub. This part can be frustrating. You can see my 2 locker wires, and I believe that's my pods. So we've already run everything else through here. There should be room to just feed this right behind this grommet here and get through the firewall. All right, so we've got our red power wire fed through the grommet in the firewall here, along with the rest of the wires we were looking at earlier. Drape that over the engine for now. Obviously don't want to hook it up and be dealing with a hot wire, so that's gonna be one of the last things we do. We've got it going through the firewall. Apologize for it being dark, but it comes through the inside of the firewall, and then we've just got it run kind of along where we're gonna route it underneath the carpet and over here to the amp. And then it's gonna hook in, looks like on the back side. Went ahead and took our window out and got this loose just to help us get this under this carpet back here. Next step is gonna be go ahead and getting the RCAs and the ground hooked up. The RCAs are gonna have to come from the amp, route them along the same route as the power wire, and then we're gonna have to pull the radio out and hook all that up behind there. So now we're gonna go ahead and pull the bezel off the dash so we can access the back of the radio. In the TJs, you've gotta pry this plastic piece up in the very front. Just kind of feel it pop out. And then with this cage in here, it's actually a little tricky, but there's 2 screws right here, and a 1/4 inch fits them perfect, but I can't get a socket on it due to the cage. So I use a little 1/4 inch open end wrench. Now that we've got our 2 screws out, this should just kind of pop out. Pretty sure most of the clips on mine are busted. There it comes. Now you've got access to the radio. Got 4 more screws right here. I'll use a Phillips head screwdriver. I'm not sure what size those are. They look like a 8 or 10 mil. All right, guys, right here is what people say is the most confusing part. Obviously, we've pulled the head unit out. Now we're looking at the back. Here's the wiring harness that came with the Sony radio that was in the Jeep when we bought it. There's where your RCAs go to go out to the sub. That's pretty self-explanatory. But you also have to wire up your remote turn-on wire, which was that little purple wire that came with the Quadratec package. Now, there are a couple purple wires in here, but we actually looked up the wiring schematic for the pigtail that came with this radio, and everything we could find said the blue with white stripe wire is the one that powers the remote turn-on. A lot of people said that theirs isn't connected to anything. It's just kind of hanging out of the back of the radio. Ours seems to have been connected to something and is at least plugged into the main pigtail. So I believe what we're going to do is take this connection apart and then just splice our purple wire that came with the sub into this, put it back together, and then see if we can get the sub to turn on and off with the radio. All right, guys, I apologize again for it being pretty dark in here. I've got it lit the best I can. We have our blue wires connected with a little red butt connector we had laying around. We're not electricians. Doesn't look as good as that, but it should get the job done. And we've got our RCAs plugged in. I just did, no, you can't see it, red to red and then white to black. Doesn't really matter as long as you keep it the same on both ends. So we'll go red to red and black to white on the sub as well. We're about to fish these back down through the dash and try to clean them up coming out under the floor. I'll catch back up with you in a minute. All right, we're hopefully done behind the head unit. Got the RCAs and the power wire routed back under the dash, coming out down here. really ready to start trying to hide some of these wires and cleaning this up. We're just gonna run it right along the side of the tub here under the carpet. Then we'll come out back there by the sub, get these hooked up, get the ground hooked up, and we'll see if we have power before putting all this back together. Little side note, you're gonna need some zip ties. These little mini zip ties are gonna be perfect. All right, let me show you what we have. Here's our remote turn on, RCAs, and main power wire. We actually ran them right in this crease along between this bracket for the rear seat and the fender well underneath the carpet. And they kind of hug along down there and then come out right here along the side. Come up over, and then we ran them right in this little groove right here. Ours happens to be a hard top, so there's some factory wiring running underneath this panel. So that's what we did there. Looks pretty clean so far. I think the only wire you're gonna be able to see once we get finished up is just where it comes out of the floor right here. Next, we've got to determine where our ground goes. I think we're gonna put it right here. Seems like a good spot. I'm gonna clean that off, get this bolt out, and get our ground hooked up. All right, we've got our ground wire connected right here, run under the carpet, coming out of the same spot as the rest. Got our amp and sub ready. I think we're gonna tilt this thing over, get it in position, and we're gonna start hooking these up. This is ground, that's your remote turn on, that's your main power. Should be all there is to it. We've got red to red, black to black, got the RCAs plugged in. These aren't color coded, so if it doesn't work, I'm just gonna swap them around because I can't remember which was right and left in the radio. So we've got two 13 mils here, gonna run these out and then get the sub actually screwed into the floor. All right, guys, we've got our battery hooked back up. We've got the positive now connected. There's our inline fuse. So we ran our positive up along the back of the firewall, along with our rigid pods and our two lockers. Like I said, they come down here and go through this rubber grommet through the firewall. We've got zip ties periodically, trying to clean it up a little. I already showed you what we did with our wires. They're really running right under that fold in the seat underneath the carpet. They come up right through this hole here. And then here's a look at the final install. This worked out great. The seat comes down, everything fits. You can barely even see that our ground wire is right here, running underneath that carpet. Everything just turned out really clean. And best of all, we've got power. We're about to go outside and let the Jeep run, tune the system a little bit. Yeah, we're super pumped with how clean this turned out back here. We've still got plenty of room for our little tow strap. Usually I kept right here, keep some spare fluids there. It's worked out really well. Can't wait to hear this thing. Just to prove that we've got power. Everything's working. We're about to go ride. Do a little bit of tuning. All right, guys, that does it for this one. Thanks for watching the install of the Kicker Comp 10-inch subwoofer with the amp. Like we said, it's the Quadratec package mounted up in the Jeep Great. About to go run and see what it sounds like. As always, if you have any further questions, drop them in the comments. Remember to leave the video a like if you found it useful and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks again for watching. This has been Everyday Off-Road.